Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? Popo here bringing guys a new video, and today we're going to be updating our Regulation H tier list. Let's go. Welcome, everybody, and today we're going to be updating our Regulation H tier list. We had a couple of regionals go by already, including Dortmund this past weekend, and we've seen a shake-up in the meta like crazy. The last time I did this was pre-Baltimore, so yeah, a lot has changed. There's been a couple of Pokemon that have really risen to popularity and dominance in the format, so yeah, my original or my last tier list did not represent those Pokemon, and we'll see if they do today. But let's just get right into it. We have Hatterene. I think still Hatterene is pretty good. I think you have to be ready for size spam in any form. And Hatterene's one of those Pokemon that is really good in size spam, as it can be used in Trick Room. And a lot of teams right now are having a hard time with Trick Room. So if you have a pretty reliable way and source to get up Trick Room, you can just win games straight up. So Hatterene is a very, very good Pokemon at the moment, and I expect it to continue to do very, very well. Next, we have Garchomp. I think Garchomp is still an A-tier Pokemon. I know in my original tier list, I put it at S-tier. I thought it was going to be much better in the format than it has been, though it's still been very, very solid. So no discredit to Garchomp itself. And I think it's still a Pokemon that is putting a lot of pressure on quite a few of the really good Mons and has really impacted the meta in a couple of different ways. But this is probably going to be really low A-tier. Baxcalibur, I think Baxcalibur has been very poor. I thought this Pokemon was going to be a lot better, and it just hasn't really shown up. Snow is kind of weak because rain has been so strong, but then there's also sun that's kind of out on the outskirts too. So it just really hasn't been good, and it doesn't really pressure any of the good Pokemon in the meta. Though we could see a little bit of a resurgence with the rise of Dragapult, so maybe it could be a B tier Mon at some point. But right now, C. Next, we have Salamence, and Salamence has done pretty well at a couple events, but I just don't really think it's that good. I just think it just shares a lot of weaknesses with stuff that's super common right now, and it just, like, will lose to those exact same things, and it's not very good into Primarina, so it's really losing a lot out on those situations. It's a Terra Hog because you're going to have to get rid of the weaknesses, and it's slower than Garchomp, so you're losing out a little bit on that. Intimidate is good, but with how often we're seeing King Gambits in the meta right now, and Annihilape, don't discredit Annihilape either, it really is not bringing that to the table as well. Clefable I think is an A tier. I was very iffy on this Mon. I know that one team that was going around at the time with the Volcarona, King Gambit, and Clefable was pretty good, but that core has really translated well into a lot of different variations of the team. I've seen variations with Dondozo, seen variations with Rain Team combined with those. So there's been a lot going on with it, and I think it's the enabler of a lot of those teams, and Unaware is just always a good ability, so very, very good. This thing is pretty low C tier. I still think it's pretty good. It just doesn't really have a place at the moment. One of the best Pokemon in the format is a fighting type, so it is really hard to use any of these setup Mons, especially Steel type setup Mons, and yeah. We saw this Pokemon do pretty well. I don't think it's that great. I just think that Wolf Glick is an amazing player and made Weezing look very, very good. I think on all my tier lists, I've put this thing around C tier. It's just because it's like kind of a gimmicky team and it's very good, but the problem with it, and this would go like this, but the problem with it is it's really hard to use, but there are a lot of Pokemon relying on their abilities right now, so if you can make it work, you can win some games. So Mimikyu, I think Mimikyu's still probably pretty good. It's just, once again, one of those Pokemon that's not really being used. I think it might be good into the current comp that is really dominating with Dragapult Sneasler, so maybe we can see a rise in Mimikyu into those. I think it's a very good Trick Room setter, as well as a Pokemon that puts a little bit of pressure on some of the other Pokemon. It's really bad into a few matchups, so maybe that's why it hasn't really seen play. But I really like Mimikyu. It's something I'm going to be trying out relatively soon. Next we have Electabuzz. I say Electabuzz is very high A tier. This Pokemon is part of the new Chalk, is what I've seen some people calling it right now, which is basically the best 6 Pokemon, and this is one of the enablers. It's very bulky. It also can't be put to sleep. You're redirecting tons of attacks. It stops, beat up Annihilate. It stops beat up or Population Bomb onto Archaludon. It can take a hit from Archaludon. It's just really, really, really strong, and it pressures things like Pelipper, so that can be really important too in the current meta. Though it does have its weaknesses, and a lot of that isn't really being exploited at the moment, like ground types. Once again, Garchomp is really good into this Pokemon, as if Garchomp or your team can knock out everything but Electabuzz, Garchomp can just win the game. So you got to be wary of that if you do choose to use this. Chandelure, I think Chandelure is probably in C tier. I think this Pokemon's pretty good. It can do a few things. Its fire typing is really good for it, and on top of that, it can't be faked out. It can hit with Ghost. We've seen a couple of different Terra types on it, grass, water. I've even seen a fighting one, so it could do quite a few things and put a lot of pressure on a lot of Pokemon, as it does do a lot of damage. Its speed tier is a little meh, but yeah, if you can get around that speed tier, I think it's a pretty good Pokemon. It's just really, really hard to use because it's so frail. Next we have Samurai, Hisuian Samurai. Regular Samurai is booty cheeks. This Samurai could be low B tier, though it doesn't really have the results at the moment to consider it going to be B tier. This Pokemon puts a lot of pressure on things like Goldango, where it can just hit it with a Night Slash and just one-shot it. It crits so often, and with Sharpness, you're doing so much damage. You can throw Scope Lens on it, Focus Sash. I've even seen Life Orb, so you can do quite a few things with it. And it pairs really well with like Electabuzz and a few other, redirection Pokemon that can really take advantage of that. And being able to hit like Dondozo for critical hits is really, really nice too. So next we have Fire Tauros. I think Fire Tauros is pretty bad. It's definitely better than Gudra, but it's just not that great. Incineroar is just better, so you might as well just use Incineroar because it gets Fake Out. Next is Lycanroc. I think this is pretty bad too. Sand teams have kind of been meh. We've seen Tyranitar be kind of successful on its own, but without having anybody taking advantage of the sand like the Lycanroc. Next, we have the Typhlosion. I think Typhlosion is actually a tier Pokemon. This is a Pokemon that you're going to have something to deal with. If you don't have something that can deal with this thing, you can just straight up lose to its eruptions, whether that be you set up the rain, or, you have a priority attack to hit it, or you are just faster than it and can get an attack off. This thing does so much damage. It can run Choice Scarf, Choice Specs. It can run Charcoal. So there's quite a few things it could do there. I've even run into a Weakness Policy one, which was not very good. So don't worry about that. But and it hits some of the Pokemon that are really good right now, like Dragapult for super effective. It one-shots Sneaslers. It does really good into Electabuzz as well. So it does a lot. It does a lot. There are a few Pokemon that kind of just wall this. Incineroar is a really good answer for this Pokemon, as it hits us for super effective, knocks off its item, and also does massive amounts of damage for that eruption to do just significantly less. So yeah, there are definitely ways to stop this pretty easily, but it is a very, very strong Pokemon, and you got to be prepared for the eruption spam. Next is Garganacl. I think it's pretty bad, but it's probably around here. I think it's definitely usable, but the meta is very fast right now, so trying to slow down the meta is kind of hard. Fighting types are very, very good right now because fairies are so weak. So having a Pokemon like Garganacl is very difficult to use. With a Ghost Terra, you're using your Terra on a Pokemon that's more defensive, so it's really, really hard when the meta is just outspeeding your terrestrialized Pokemon. And with Wide Guard, it is pretty good into some of the team comps, like something like that Goldango paired with Incineroar and Garganacl. Goldango's kind of shut down, so it's pretty good in that case. It also resists Ghost type, which is a pretty good type right now, but it just doesn't do enough to warrant the terrestrialization or the spot on the team sometimes. So yes, C, but it could be good. Gothitelle, I think Gothitelle's probably high C tier. This Pokemon's really good, very hard to use like always. Perish Trap is relevant. Not super relevant, but I have seen it more often recently than I have in the past. It hasn't been performing well at tournaments, but I think overall you just need to make sure that you know what this Pokemon's going to do and be prepared for it if you see it in the team list with something like the Gengar or even like Murkrow setting up that that Perish Song. Next we have Corviknight, and I was always high on the Corviknight, and it has been performing decently well. I don't want to say it's been like a top tier Pokemon, but I think it's definitely a B tier Pokemon. I think this Pokemon is splashable on quite a few teams. We saw it on Wolf Glick's team. It has a couple of Terra types it can use effectively, from fire to water to grass. It can use a couple different items, from safety goggles, citrus berry leftovers. It can go for bulk up sets, or it can go for iron defense. It can go for a bunch of roosts. So it has quite a few usages. It's pretty decent into the meta right now, especially something like that Sneasler. It's really good into that Pokemon. And the Dragapult, because it can't really hit this thing for anything more than neutral, which is this Pokemon's very bulky, of course, and it can hit both back for significant damage. So yeah, I think a pretty good mon into the meta right now, and we'll see if the usage of this of Corviknight actually rises. Ceruledge, I think Ceruledge has been very disappointing. I thought this Pokemon would be a lot better than it is, but it has really dropped off. Being a Ghost Fire type is actually really good for it. It just, once again, Dragapult's pretty significant. It's often a Terra Hog. It does have a couple of different sets. You can go for bulk up stuff, or you can go for like Choice Band, I've seen, and things like that. But it is a pretty difficult Pokemon to use, and right now in the meta, I just feel like it's just missing that little bit of oomph. Politoed, I thought Politoed would be better than it is, but I think it's still probably around here. It's a rain activator. It does something different than Pelipper. Of course, Pelipper is going to have the advantage because it just like has Tailwind and it has Wide Guard and stuff, so it's going to have a little bit of advantage, and Hurricane is very important too. So it's going to have a little bit of advantage. It's not as weak to Rillaboom as Politoed is. And yeah, but Politoed does way more damage and is bulkier overall, so it does have something going for it that Pelipper doesn't. Okay, Skeledirge. I think Skeledirge is actually probably around here. This Pokemon's very good with Unaware. It can kind of wall Dondozo if you have the right build on it, or you set it up in the right situations. It does a lot of damage if it starts setting up those Torch Songs, but it just feels really weak into a lot of the Pokemon that are out there. It's bulky, but it's not the bulkiest Pokemon, and its speed tier is very bad. So it just gets outclassed by a ton of different Pokemon, and yeah, it's also competing for a fire spot against like Incineroar, which is always going to be a difficult position to be in. Next we have Snorlax. I think Snorlax is actually good. I just think people aren't really trying it yet. I'm going to put it around here. I mean, what else could I say? Belly Drum is very good. The meta, once again, is very fast, and there's a lot of physical attacking Pokemon, and that includes a lot of fighting types, which really do pressure Snorlax. But if you can get a Trick Room set up and a Belly Drum set up, you can just kind of sweep through anybody out there. So maybe we could see some Snorlax. I plan on doing a team where I'm using Snorlax, so that'll be coming soon over on my live stream over on YouTube and Twitch. So make sure you follow if you're not, or subscribe, and come and hang out. Toxicroak is... we've seen him do okay. I think there was a Japanese team that was doing really well with it, but I'm going to put it here. I just think the typing is the same as Sneasler, so a lot more people are going to be ready for this typing, and now it can't really take advantage of that. You know, with Surf stuff, it's pretty cool because, you know, with the dry skin, you're just healing up. You can keep that Focus Sash intact for a lot longer. So it's really cool in those situations, and it gets Fake Out, but I just think Sneasler way outclasses this Pokemon, and it's not even close. Next we have Charizard. I still think Charizard does a lot of damage, but it's just not good. It's too frail. Just doesn't fit like the great positions like Typhlosion does, where Typhlosion just seems like it's just doing more because Eruption is just so strong. Mamoswine. I still think this Pokemon has hope. I mean, there's a couple of lovers out there like Zhang. He's really, really good with this Pokemon and has been using it forever. So I can't discount it, especially from somebody that plays in my locals and wins a lot of events or does really well with it. You know, I can't discredit it. And then does well at the regionals, as we saw, to you know, almost making top cuts. So Serena, I think Serena's fallen off. I think it was good at the beginning of the meta, but maybe it's around here. It does still stop Fake Out. It's just not really good on those rain teams like it used to be. So I'm throwing it down here. A lot of people are high on Araquanid. I'm not. I've never lost to one, so I can't feel the power of it. It just feels super weak to me. Every time I see it, I'm like, well, that's free right there. Like, I can't lose to this Pokemon, right? Tatsugiri, I think Tatsugiri is still good. If I can find Dondozo quickly, I'll throw Dondozo up too. You always have to be prepared for these two because, you know, they're just really, really good. Am I just missing Dondozo or am I, because I'm blind? No, here he is. Dondozo is better than Tatsugiri. Obviously, Tatsugiri needs Dondozo, but Dondozo doesn't need Tatsugiri. But I'm going to put them both in the B tier because to combine, they're very, very good, and the team composition often requires both of them, though we have seen that that Solo Dozo has been performing very, very well. So you got to keep that in mind when you are fighting, that you might not see the Tatsugiri and expect a super bulky yawn, you know, Dondozo, and just have something to make sure that you are dealing with that. You can't use stat boost to deal with it because it is unaware usually, so just make sure you're ready for that. Male Indeedee is probably up here. Once again, Size Spam. This Pokemon enables Size Spam as well as being able to use Expanding Force itself. It also has After You, so you can go for some interesting plays with like After You Eruption with Torkoal. It also gets Trick Room, so you can have Trick Room set up on it, but usually you're going to see Choice Scarf, Expanding Force, or Choice Scarf After You on, you know, some slower Pokemon that does a bazillion damage, so just be aware of this Pokemon, you know, and have make sure you have something that can deal with it. You know, maybe a Follow Me or something like that, because After You gets redirected by Follow Me. So, yeah. Next, we have Gallade. I think Gallade's probably B tier. I don't think it's better than Dozo. It's definitely better than Tatsugiri, so we'll put it here. This Pokemon enables some teams where you need that fighting type, or you need the Wide Guard, or you need another Trick Room setter. This is going to be the Pokemon that can fit on those teams. It's really good in Psychic terrain because it can't be faked out. It's pretty frail, so it's often going to have that Focus Sash, but it also has Sharpness, so even if you're investing in its defenses, it's still going to be able to put out a lot of damage with those slashing moves. And on top of that, those slashing moves often have a higher chance to crit. This Pokemon also one-shots Archaludons if they don't Terrasilize, so that is a big plus on having it too, because Sacred Sword, and it stabs Sacred Sword, so it's really good. Venusaur, I never thought Venusaur was going to be that good because I think there's just better options, so I think it's still probably down here. I just think it's really weak. It's super frail. Like, its damage output is pretty lackluster, and like other Pokemon get Sleep Powder or Spore that are just better than this Pokemon, so there's just better options out there. Volcarona is probably a little bit worse than Electabuzz, but I'm going to put it at A tier. I think it's really, really good. There's a couple of different sets around that you can go with. It's been performing extremely, extremely well at the regionals. So, yeah, really, really, really good Pokemon. Like I said, couple of different sets can be used. A lot of people are going for the dance set with Quiver Dance and like Heat Wave and Giga Drain or Bug Buzz. And I think that set is great. I've also seen specs on this thing. I've seen, you know, Citrus Berries with, you know, like Will-O-Wisp, and I can't think of the bug move that lowers special attacks. So this thing has quite a few different options it can use, and all of them are very, very good. So yeah, I think this Pokemon is good, and it's really good next to Electabuzz, so it's got a plus there. Okay, Porygon. Now, Porygon was like here on my last tier list. I think it was B's. It might have been even C's. This Pokemon is probably the top of A tier. This team is very good that this thing is enabling right now, which is kind of called the Porygon Ursaluna Balance team. I don't know if it has like a specific name yet because there's nothing really catchy to go with it, but this balance team is very, 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 very good. It puts a lot of pressure on your opponent inside and outside of Trick Room. It's just like the Pokemon that it has on it are very bulky, but also output tons of damage. You're often seeing like a high special attacking stat on the Porygon, along with the very strong Guts Ursaluna. So the amount of damage you could just output on one turn is so significant, and your opponent has to select which target they're going to go after, while the other one is free to do whatever it wants. So it's just a really, really strong team, and this is one of the enablers of that team. Next we have Basculegion. This Pokemon has dropped off. I'm going to put it in C tier. The top of C tier. I think it's still viable and usable. It just really, really hasn't done anything. So, like it did pretty good at Baltimore. I don't think it performed super, super well at Dortmund this weekend. But yeah, it just hasn't been as good. I think maybe because Rillaboom is just so significant right now that it just really has fallen off. Dusclops, I love Dusclops. I still think it's a C tier. It just, there's certain stuff that just shut it down, so it just feels super weak in those against those comps. But it's a really fun Pokemon to use, and there's a couple of different sets. It just has 4 move syndrome. It also has All My Friends Are Knocked Out syndrome, which is having both of those is pretty rough. Usually you have one of those, but this one has both of those. So it is tough. Sinistcha, I think Sinistcha is really good still, and I think it's probably getting a little bit better. We've seen it for redirection on some of these balanced teams, as well as being able to heal up like your Ursalunas or your Porygons and stuff like that. But we've also seen it on teams with like Dozo and things, like Solo Dozo and stuff, and it can set Trick Room. So I think it's a really, really good Pokemon. And Matcha Gotcha is always something you have to worry about, especially because of that high burn chance. Okay, so my original tier list had this here because I thought, you know, Palance was back. Palance has not been back. As a matter of fact, Palance has been way worse than it was ever. Palafin has just been terrible. It has been awful. I've faced it multiple times in the GC, on ladder, whatever it might be. It just feels so bad. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Rillaboom and Incineroar exist. Those Pokemon just completely shut down this Pokemon. Like, you would think that Incineroar would be bad against this Pokemon, right? But no, the Intimidate is so strong against it, and then pairing with the Fake Out and the Rillaboom, it literally can't win. It's so bad. We've seen a couple of people using Bronzong, though I don't think it's really that good. I'm going to put it slightly above Dusclops. I think it's slightly better, but it does still have a lot of glaring weaknesses. Like, it just has no damage output. You know, Gyro Ball's not really hitting anything for too much right now, except for the 2 new best Pokemon, I guess. Which this might actually pair well into the Sneasler plus the Dragapult, because I don't think they can one-shot it unless they're Terra Ghost, Terra Blast. And even then, you could probably just go Dark, or you probably wouldn't want to go Dark, huh? You probably go... No, you couldn't go normal either. I don't know what you would go. You try to figure it out, but you'd have to try a bunch of different things. Maybe Fairy would be the call, but who knows. So, yeah, unless they're that, this is a really good Pokemon. Pair next to Fake Out, you're guaranteed to get a Trick Room set off. But, yeah, it just hasn't been really that good. Arcanine, I've lost to a couple of Arcanines, but people aren't really using it too much. I think it's probably better than people think it is. You know, you got the Intimidate, and but I've seen a lot of people using the other one where you can't take recoil damage. I can't think of the name at the moment, but yeah, I've seen that with like Head Smash and Flare Blitz, where you're just not taking recoil damage with Life Orb on them, or even Choice Band. Extreme Speed's always going to be relevant, so you have that going for you too. I think this Pokemon is pretty good, but once again, fighting types are very prevalent. We have a lot of water types out there, so it is really hard to use something like this. Gastrodon, you would think would be pretty good with all the rain going on, but it just really hasn't been that good. I think it's probably around here. I don't want it to win the World Championship anymore. I don't want any more of these as like giveaways, so let it stay low. Excadrill, I thought Excadrill would be pretty decent, but this Pokemon has been terrible. Once again, the sand teams aren't running anything that takes advantage of the sand like this, because it's just not worth it. This Pokemon is just not outputting the damage it was in the past, and especially in the Dynamax era. It just doesn't have what it needs. It's just, there's just better Pokemon that you could just put on your team. Oricorio, I think this Pokemon's probably still pretty good. I think with Volcarona being so good in this, I think that team is really interesting. I think it could be explored a little bit more. Comfey, I think Comfey is very, very good. This Pokemon can set Tailwind and Trick Room, and I think a lot of people forget that, but it also has Priority 3 healing, which gets past Fake Out in a lot of cases. And also, you can go for Draining Kiss at Priority 3, which is really good if you're trying to knock out like a Rillaboom, who's going to go for Grassy Glide and potentially knock you out first. So there's a couple of cool things you can do with it. I think this is a Pokemon that doesn't deal with, you know, the 4-move syndrome, where it has a lot of good moves, but for whatever team you're using, it has those moves. Rather than you need all these moves on this Pokemon, but it kind of does have all my friends are knocked out syndrome, so you gotta be careful for that. Whimsicott, I think Whimsicott's pretty good. I think it's probably a B tier. It enables a lot of teams, including the Sun team, so it has to be pretty good. Also, Tailwind, it just hasn't been performing very well, and I've said this in the past, it performs so much better in these restricted formats than it does anywhere else, and why that is, I'm not really sure, but it does. It's just the way it works. We see Covert Cloak on this thing, Focus Sash, Ghost Terra. We've seen Fairy Terra. I've seen Fairy Terra, so it does more with the Moonblast. Murkrow, I thought Murkrow would be a little bit better, but it hasn't really been getting the results, so I'm going to put it down around here. It does a lot, like Haze, and then you get, you know, I like to use the special version with Air Cutter so you can get flinches. But a lot of people go for the Brave Bird version, or they go for the Foul Play. But I think Foul Play might be the play now because Dragapult's so popular, so you're able to get a lot of damage out into Dragapult. Though it is pretty slow even under Tailwind, so you got to be careful about that. I don't even know if it outspeeds Dragapult unless you're like max speed. Sneasler is our first S tier, and I think last one I had it B tier. Now it's S tier. This Pokemon has been absolutely dominating. It won Dortmund, and it just felt super, super strong. And it, like, if you look at the list of all of the teams that like got top 16, I think there was like 2 teams that didn't have Sneasler. That's crazy. This Pokemon has just been doing so much. Close combat with Dire Claw. Then you can have your third move, Protect. And with a Focus Sash, with Poison Touch, it's just been so strong. And I wasn't expecting this Pokemon to be as good as it is. I thought this Pokemon was going to be decent in the past. I was like, you know, there's going to be something where this Pokemon is going to be good. But never did I ever think it was going to be a regional winner and on top of the leaderboards of usage. Never. Electabuzz was also on the usage top charts, which is really interesting. Not something I would have ever expected my whole entire life. If you told me that 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you. But yeah, Sneasler, crazy performances it's been doing. Its win percentage is so high. So this Pokemon is something you need to be worried about if you're playing on ladder. I'm still Scrafty believer. He's terrible, but I'm still believer. I think this thing is probably here. Decidueye, Hisuian Decidueye is really good. It can hit, you know, the Goldangos. The problem with it is speed tier is really low. That's why people have dropped this Pokemon in favor of those Flamigos, because Flamigo does the same thing, except it's faster, right? It just doesn't have like the Leaf Blade and stuff like that. It has Brave Bird instead, which is way worse, but in a lot of situations is actually better. Muk, you have to always be ready for the stupid Muk Smeargle teams, because if you're not, you could just lose. Next we have Tinkaton. I think Tinkaton's pretty bad. It's probably here, honestly. I thought this Pokemon would be decent because it's like can do stuff to Goldango, but it's just bad, right? It just feels bad. Ninetales, I don't think Ninetales is that great. We've seen it get a little bit of success, so I'm gonna put it up here. I just think it misses out on a lot of damage. Its special attack just doesn't feel that great. Into the meta currently, it's not that great. Like, you would think it'd be good into the Sneasler team with Dragapult, but honestly, it just loses to it because it gets outsped by both of those Pokemon, and they can just take a KO on it. So it's just really hard to use this Pokemon effectively. Indeedee, regular Indeedee. I think Indeedee is actually probably, it might even be A tier at this point. I think this Pokemon is very good. I think it's on certain teams. I guess I'll put it at the top of B tier. It enables, you know, the size spam teams, but also can enable a lot of the teams that are just going for setups. But I think Electabuzz has kind of taken the position where it's just a little bit better, but stopping Fake Out is always going to be super relevant, so got to give some love to it. Delphox has been seeing some usage. I'm going to probably put it around, it's better than this, but not better than that. It's a cool Pokemon, right? It's a really, really cool Pokemon. I'm glad it's getting some usage at like any level, because I've really liked this Pokemon for a long time. It's just been so bad. So Delphox, yeah, showing up. Lilligant, I think Lilligant's definitely a B tier Pokemon. You have to be prepared if you're facing up against Lilycole. This is just better than regular Lilligant. It's better than Venusaur by a ton, because it gives you the... Oops, who did I just move? Uh-oh. I accidentally clicked. I don't see anybody move, though. But it just gives you like the ability to have physical attacker and a special attacker on the field at the same time, putting pressure on different types of Pokemon with those moves, including a grass into a like water Pokemon, and fire attacks into like steel Pokemon. You also get the fighting attacks into like rock Pokemon that would resist the fire. So it does a lot of cool things there. After You is also going to be very, very good. You can go After You Trick Room, which I've done in the past if you think that your Lilligant's going to get knocked out that turn. So that's a really, really cool play you can do that people don't often think about. Farigiraf has been very good in the past. This Pokemon has been very lackluster in this regulation. I think it's still better than these probably. It's probably better than this too. It just doesn't feel that good. Like, there's better Trick Room setters, there's better Hyper Voice users, there's better, you know, all this other stuff, and the like priority attacks aren't as like damaging as they used to be. So I mean, you could still throw this on a team, but you rather just have Porygon 2. It's just gonna do more for you, I think. Zoroark, I think Zoroark's still pretty good. I think it's probably here. Because you gotta be there mentally to face up against this Pokemon, because it can do a ton of damage and just put you in bad positions if you don't call it correctly that this is the Pokemon that's out there. So you gotta be very careful. Pelipper's probably high B tier. We've seen a big decrease in the usage of those rain teams as more and more people use it. More and more people are able to counter it. Becomes more and more hard to use, so less people use it over time. We could see a resurgence of the team later on down the meta, but for right now, this is like a B tier Pokemon. It's doing wide guard stuff sometimes, not really anymore, but it's going for hurricanes, weather balls, tailwinds, and stuff like that. So it's still enabling a couple of teams, but it has really dropped off. Grimmsnarl, I'd say Grimmsnarl's probably low B tier. We've seen a little bit of a rise in Grimmsnarl. He's setting up screens again. He's going for the Spirit Breaks, which is pretty good right now. But he still just kind of feels weak, and he has All My Friends Are KO'd syndrome, so you just get rid of everything that's not Grimmsnarl, and then he's like, yeah, I can't do much. Flamigo, I think Flamigo is probably an A tier Pokemon. This is a Pokemon that's also getting used on that Porygon 2 team. It's really, really strong outside of Trick Room, and with the Focus Sash can actually be pretty good in the Trick Room too. Close Combat is doing a ton of damage. It can hit Goldango for super effective, which is really, really cool. And yeah, it also gets Wide Guard and Taunt, so you get some supportive capabilities with it too, which is a huge deal on a Pokemon that is often known to do damage. Maushold is definitely a high A tier Pokemon. Maybe not there, probably here. This Pokemon is very, very good. Population Bomb is very good. We've seen, you know, beat up. It's won a regional without Annihilate, so that's really cool too. That means it's good on its own, even though people thought it was just you had to have the two. There's teams where if you're doing closed team sheets, you don't know if it's Population Bomb or if it's going to be beat up stuff, so you have to be prepared for both. So yeah, you always have to have something for this Pokemon, and I think its performances have really spoken for themselves, honestly. Raichu's pretty terrible. I'm not even going to really talk about it. Torkoal, I think Torkoal's still really good. I'm going to put it in B tier. I think it could output a lot of damage still. I just, it's really, really hard to use. But with the Porygon team, the Porygon 2 team really becoming prevalent, maybe we start to see more of the Torkoal coming out again and being able to go for those eruptions because it's going to be slower and it one-shots the Ursalunas and it does significant damage to the Porygon. So we could see the rise of this again against those situations. Though once again, you have to worry about the Wide Guard and Flamigo. Rillaboom. Rillaboom. I'm going to put it here because of longevity. It's been better for longer in different formats. Different versions of Regulation H as well. It's just been better. It doesn't mean that Sneasler is not better at the current moment or might be like this going into the next regionals too. But I just think the versatility that you get from the Rillaboom is very, very good. Fake Out, Grassy Glide, like it's so strong. Wood Hammer just does a bazillion damage to stuff. And with Assault Vest, it's actually super, super bulky, especially because the meta isn't, like the special attackers in the meta aren't the strongest in the world. So he's able to live at least 1 to 2 attacks every single time. So you're getting value out. And with U-turn and grassy terrain, you can also, pivot out that, getting rid of psychic terrain or healing up your Pokemon. So it's really, really good. We've seen a lot of more Kilowattrel being used. I still think this thing needs to prove itself, so I'm going to put it around here. But yeah, the discharge stuff is real, and it goes for Tailwind, and it's super, super fast. So you can't really stop it from getting Tailwind up, and it's often running Covert Cloak, so definitely can't get the Tailwind to not go up. Then you see it go for like Terra Electric, Thunderbolt, or Discharges. Volbeat is also seeing usage increase, though I think it's still pretty bad. I don't know. It can do a couple of different things. Encore is really good. Tailwind. It can go for Struggle Bug. That's the one. Struggle Bug that lowers the special attack, so it can do something like that too. So it does have some use cases, but I just think overall it's kind of gimmicky. Dragonite, on the other hand, is probably an A tier Pokemon. This is better than this for sure. It just outputs so much damage, whether it's Assault Vested with Multiscale or if it's Inner Focus with Choice Band. This thing is just a menace a lot of the times, and it could just really wreak havoc on teams. And if you save it for late game, after your opponent's used all their resources to knock out all your other Pokemon, you could bring this in and they really can't deal with it. Outrage with Choice Band is just crazy, and it one-shots a lot of things in the meta. Ludicolo is pretty bad. I'll put it around Venusaur because it's like the same. Dragapult is now S tier. Dragapult's being used on a lot of different teams, and paired with the Sneasler, like there's nothing that resists both of them. So it's really difficult to get past this combination of Pokemon, and as a lead pair is very strong. Very strong. And there's very few Pokemon that are going to live at attack from both of these. So yeah, this core is crazy. Like even these three you could just throw on a team. Archaludon, I think Archaludon's still probably a B tier. I think it has dropped down. I had it at S tier, but once again, more and more people and more teams are becoming more effective against it. So maybe I'll put it in. I guess I'll put it in A tier. I guess it can't have dropped down because you still have to be prepared for it, right? But like the Pokemon above it here are just strictly better in my opinion. So Riolu is pretty bad. I'll put it like here. This is terrible. Amoonguss. Amoonguss has seen a rise again in usage. We saw it be pretty poor, but going into Dormant, this thing was really good. I think this is probably just under Electabuzz. I do like Electabuzz a little bit more, but yeah, putting things to sleep is always just going to be so strong. That's why Sneasler's so strong, because you have that small chance of, it's like 16% chance when you attack to put something to sleep, which is crazy. Blaziken we've seen Blaziken. I think it's actually pretty good. I was surprised by how good it was. I did try the team. Wasn't for me, just not my type of team, but I have played against it, and I played somebody who has been using it, and it's very effective as a Pokemon. Just does a lot of damage with that Stellar Tear, surprising amount of damage. Hydreigon I actually had up here before, but now I'm going to put it down to B tier. It has been doing some stuff, but it really hasn't been impacting the meta as much as I thought it would be. I thought it was just really, really strong, but, you know, you got the Sneasler now who's really putting pressure on this, even if it does, like, Fairy Terror, which I've seen. Poison Terror is probably more common now, but Dragapult also just does a ton of damage into this thing with Dragon Darts, so... Primarina. I think Primarina is probably A tier. It's probably here. You know what? Garchomp's probably down here, right? Garchomp's probably here. Yeah, Primarina is very, very good. It's the best fairy type by far. It also puts a lot of pressure on like these two up here if you can get Trick Room set up. It's also really good against Electabuzz as it can't redirect it. It's good against Volcarona with the Hyper Voice, so it's really, really good against a lot of the top threats. Though it's very bad against Rillaboom, and it kind of forces a Terra. We've seen Terra Poison, we've also seen Terra Grass and Terra Steel. I like Terra Grass myself, but now probably with the rise of the Sneasler, it's probably going to be Terra Steel more often than not. You can also go Terra Poison, which would be really good into it too, though you could still be put to sleep, so you gotta be careful. Oranguru, I love Oranguru. I'm going to put it actually up here. I think it's probably the best Trick Room setter that nobody's using, besides Porygon. You just can't stop the Trick Room unless you knock it out. And then it has Instruct, and then you can just make your Pokemon do the same thing multiple times. I just don't think people are utilizing it. And yeah, that's on them. We've seen Tauros drop. I'm going to still leave it up a little bit up here, but we have seen this Pokemon drop off. It used to be on the core with the Volcarona and the King Gambit and the Clefable, but it really isn't anymore. They've replaced that with like Primarina and stuff. So yeah, it just really, really has fallen off and just really showing it's not that great. Palmot, we've seen some usage. I'm going to say it's probably a little bit better than this. Fake Out. We have, like, they're not even using Revival Blessing. This was also on Wolfglick's team. As you can see, Wolfglick's team is primarily, like, lower tier, only because of the fact that it's extremely, extremely hard to use, and I don't think people realize that. Como has been pretty bad. I think it's in a similar situation as Goodra, though it's probably better than Goodra. But the fighting types are really being countered right now, and by effect, it's double countering the Como. Tyranitar, I think Tyranitar is pretty good. It's probably worse than Dozo, though. This is probably worse than Dozo. This is probably worse than Dozo. Yeah. So Tyranitar has been pretty good. Getting up that sand, getting rid of the rain is good. It also has like knockoff, which is very, very good into a lot of the meta right now, because those items are very important, especially into like the Porygon 2. Though Sneasler is hard countering this Pokemon, and if you do go for that Terrestrialization, then you're taking a ton from the Dragapult as well. So it's really, really difficult. Ursaluna. I'm going to put this at the top of A tier because I've seen it on teams being successful without the Porygon. Maybe it's under the Porygon. I think it's under the Porygon. It's just really, really strong right now. Having the immunity to Spore, it can't be hit by the Electabuzz. Like, you could go for the Earthquakes, you can go for the Facade, you can go for the Headlong Rush. The thing is just outputting a ton of damage. It does really well into these two, as, you know, the Ghost types can't hit this. And he can hit it with fighting, but as soon as you get that Trick Room up, it's kind of over because you can't Dire Claw into this, and then Earthquake is just kind of knocking both of these Pokemon out, especially with an Ice Beam or a Terra Blast. So yeah, really good. I want a Lowland Executor to be good, but he's just terrible. He's just not really good. Annihilate. Annihilate just won the regionals without Mouse, but I think it's slightly worse than Mouse. It's still an A tier Pokemon. Like, any of these Pokemon in S and A are going to be like, you could just put these three with like another three from the A tier and you have a very good team. You can even do these three, like 2 from here and then 2 from B, and you have a very good team. So like the difference between S and B is pretty small, and then from B to C is like huge. I think these are more Pokemon that are like very specific. But yeah, no, I think Annihilate's really good because it has Defiance. It can go for bulk ups. It can hit for, you know, a ton of damage when it starts getting those boosts up, and it's pretty good into this composition right here. So yeah, all three of those Pokemon actually. Sylveon, I thought Sylveon would be better, but it's probably around here. think it's kind of poor. It just doesn't do enough. Gyarados has been pretty terrible. I'm going to throw it down here. I added this to the tier list just because of Wolf's team, but once again, I think this Pokemon is actually just pretty bad. It's just Wolflick is just, he's just built different. Dushbun is awful, though I wish it was good. We've seen some usage on Gardevoir, though I don't think it's that great. Clefairy is actually not too bad. I would put it around up here, maybe there. That's fine. I think it's still really good because you do get the Follow Me. It's super bulky, but Clefable, surprisingly, is just significantly better, which is kind of crazy. Torterra's pretty bad, though. It's pretty fun to use. Smeargle's okay. I wouldn't say Smeargle's good, but he definitely does do some things that help a lot of teams out, but he's really easy to stop. Slacking hasn't really been showing up, even with the rise of the Weezing. Actually, he's way worse. Why am I putting him way up there? This Weezing's should probably be around here, honestly. But yeah, he's just not very good. His damage output is pretty good, but overall, nah. I'm going to put Talonflame at the bottom of B tier. It does do a couple of things really well, like set up Trick Room or go for a priority Brave Bird, but its damage output to me is always just lacking. I think its best ability now is just the fact that it can taunt at such a high speed without being a priority user, which is good against Psychic Terrain and stuff like that. Armrouge, speaking of Psychic Terrain, I think this Pokemon has dropped down. I'm still going to put it in B tier, even though I think it might be closer to C tier at this point. It's more of a gimmick that you'll see on, you know, like the ladder and stuff, not doing so well in tournaments. Gengar is another one that has really fallen off. It was really good in that same team with the Volcarona and the Kingambit and the Clefable and, you know, the Water Tauros, but now it's kind of meh. It's kind of meh. I think Azumarill is decent, but it just really hasn't done anything. Kingambit is also S tier. I've had this thing in S tier since my first list. I think this thing is insane. Its damage output is crazy. It stops, you know, the Intimidates and stuff like that. It really does well into the Dragapult, but this thing just absolutely destroys it. So you gotta be careful for that. Espathra is probably here. Incineroar I had at B tier. I think now he's probably an A tier. I'm gonna put him like here. His usage was really high in the regional, and he's just been performing pretty well. So I can't really put him back in the B tier. I think he's a lot better than a lot of these Pokemon. Like I said, he's very good into the Typhlosion. So Magmar and Electabuzz are kind of interchangeable on the teams. Though I think Electabuzz is much better, and I'm going to put Magmar in B tier, probably the top of B tier, because I just think the range that you're given with Electabuzz, and it just always feels bulkier than this feels. But I guess with the drop of rain teams, maybe Magmar will be more significant, and we'll just have to wait and see. And having Will-O-Wisp ability is really good, and it's better into the Amoonguss, so yeah. Melodic hasn't really been good, though. I think it is a pretty decent Pokemon. It just doesn't have anything. Klefki has been pretty bad. I mean, I'll put him where the other one is, though. He's just worse, so I'm going to put him on the other side. Cretitan is another one. I'm going to put him next to Snorlax. I think is being underutilized. I think there are some team compositions where this Pokemon be very good. But it's just really hard when the number one Pokemon is fighting, so... Ursaluna Blood Moon. I had this thing at S tier on the last one. I think it has dropped down. It's probably B tier. We haven't seen it getting results, really. It's just been this Ursaluna now. So I'm still a believer, personally. I am still a believer in Ursaluna Blood Moon, but a lot of people aren't. Malamar is very fun to use, but it's very bad. Rotom. I don't even know why Rotom's on here. He should just be down here. Glamora is pretty good. I'd probably put it probably here. I think it might be better than these, actually. It's just like, it's good at what it does, but not good at anything else, right? It's just like overall terrible, but you can throw a Assault Vest on here, or Focus Sash is the most common we've been seeing. You can get some poisons off, which is okay, but now people are going to be more ready for Sneasler, so this might make this Pokemon a lot worse, honestly. Meowscarada saw some usage at the beginning, but I think it's really fallen off. Sableye, I think, is still very, very good. It's just another Pokemon that's really hard to use, and it has to be specific team compositions. I wanted to see more Porygon too, but it's been pretty bad, so I'm going to throw it down there. These have been a lot worse than I thought they would be, so I'm just going to throw them there, because I don't think they have been good. Same with Meow. This is Meowsticks down here. I don't know why he's even there. We saw Breloom actually do pretty good, though. I don't think it's that great of a Pokemon. I'll probably put it here. I think it could still be good, but it has to be, once again, the right team composition. You go for the Spores. You got, you know, the not Drain Punch, the Mach Punch. So it can do some stuff like that. You can put, you know, the loaded dice on it with Bullet Seed, but I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, Empoleon's probably down here now too. Conkeldurr, you still got to respect it a little bit, but since everybody's using Sneasler, Conkeldurr is going to be hard to use. Don't use this. It's on the same tier as Venusaur. I thought he would be a lot better Shiftry, but he's been pretty bad. Man, everybody, I remember when everybody thought that Metagross was going to be so good going into this game, and they were disappointed that he wasn't in the game, and they kept going, oh man, when he gets released, he's going to be so, and he's terrible. Regular Goodra is worse than Hisuian Goodra. Rhyperior, I thought would be pretty decent, because he's like okay into the rain composition if you get Tailwind Trick Room set up, but he's not very good. We saw a weird team. We saw a weird team with Drifloon, so I can't discount Drifloon. I'm going to put him up there. This is bad. So Pavillion's been really, really good. I'm going to actually put it probably here. This Pokemon has been topping and just like being a menace in the meta, and I really, really like it. And yeah, I think I'm going to probably use it sometime soon. I have the Pokeball one, so I'm gonna throw that on team. Didn't I just throw this down here? How did you get back? Pikachu's still usable, but it's not very good. It's probably down here, honestly. It's better than Raichu, actually. Goldengo is our last S-tier Pokemon. It's probably here, only because it's like you don't need anything else for this Pokemon to be good. Like just like Rillaboom. Maybe is it better than? I don't think it's better than Rillaboom. This thing can be tossed on team if you have 5 slots. You could throw this on your team. Like, you can't do that with a lot of these other Pokemon. Like, you can't just throw Goldango. You can't just throw Kingambit on as easily, though that's still a tossable Pokemon. You can't throw, like, Dragapult on because it just doesn't work in some team comp. But this can work on Trick Room. This can work on Tailwind. It can work on neither. Just like Rillaboom. So, I think it's up there. And then this thing dropped off. But it was really cool when it was used. So yeah, that is my tier list for post Dortmund Regional and I guess pre-Louisville Regional. Just my updated list. I am happy with this, and it's interesting to see how the meta has started to develop between all of these different tier lists and you know, really the rise and fall of some of the Pokemon, right? Like we've seen the rise of Sneasler, who, you know, on my first list was probably C tier. And then it was B tier, and now it's S tier, right? It's just such a strong Pokemon, and it really shows how the evolution of formats works. And it's just really cool documenting like these things sometimes, because it's just like, oh man, that's so cool that this Pokemon was kind of garbage and now is one of the top 5 Pokemon in the whole game, in my opinion. So, yeah. Anyways, guys, that is it for me. If you guys had a different list or think I put a Pokemon too low, let me know down below. And if you liked the video, make sure you guys thumbs it up. If you're not subscribed, make sure you do so. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.